Razor's hand froze on his wrench. The president of the Iron Wolves MC had destroyed rivals, commanded loyalty from every brother, and buried his past so deep no one could find it. But the new maid cleaning his clubhouse wore a ring he recognized instantly, a bent motorcycle chain wrapped around purple glass. The same ring he had twisted with bleeding hands 18 years ago in a group home, for a girl he swore to marry before vanishing forever. She never looked up. Never spoke. But that ring meant she remembered everything. And now she was here. Welcome to Echo Tales, where every story is an experience meant to be seen and heard. As you watch and listen, may God guard your heart and remind you that light always finds its way through darkness. If you're here, don't just scroll on, subscribe, like, and comment. Let's settle in. Razor's wrench slipped mid-turn, clattering against the concrete floor of his custom shop. For a man who could strip an engine blindfolded, whose hands never shook even when staring down rival club presidents, that slip meant something. He wasn't looking at the Harley-Davidson Softail on his lift anymore. He was staring through the security monitor mounted above his toolbox, watching the live feed from the Iron Wolves clubhouse kitchen 3 blocks away. And on that grainy black and white screen, he saw something that shouldn't exist. A ghost wearing a cleaning uniform and a ring made from his past. The ring was crude, almost ugly. A bent motorcycle chain link twisted around a piece of purple glass, the kind of trash jewelry a kid would make with nothing but desperation and hope. Razor had made it with his own hands 18 years ago, cutting his palms on sharp metal edges in the basement of Jefferson County Group home. He had given it to a 13-year-old girl with eyes too old for her face, a girl who saved half her meals for him when he came back beaten and starving from another failed runaway attempt. He had promised her something impossible that night, standing under a broken streetlight in the group home parking lot. "When I get out and make something of myself, I'm coming back for you. I'll marry you, Camille. I swear it." She had believed him. And 2 weeks later, he had abandoned her. If you're watching this and feeling that weight in your chest, that ache of a promise you couldn't keep or someone who left you behind, you're not alone. Hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This story gets heavier, and I want to know you're riding with me through it. Now, 18 years later, Razor was the president of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, owner of the most respected custom bike shop in Georgia, and a man whose reputation could silence a room with a single glance. He had built an empire on loyalty, brotherhood, and the kind of respect you earned through blood and steel. His cut carried 47 patches, each one a scar, a battle, a brother defended or an enemy crushed. Men twice his size stepped aside when he walked through a door. Rival clubs knew his name and feared it. He had everything a man could want: power, money, brothers who would die for him without question. Except he couldn't sleep. Every night, Razor rode alone through Georgia's back roads, throttle wide open, trying to outrun memories that clung to him like oil stains. His brothers thought he was checking territory, maintaining presence, doing president things. They didn't know he was running from a 15-year-old boy who had made a promise and broken it because he was too weak to keep it. 3 weeks ago, his vice president had approached him with a problem. The cleaning crew that serviced the clubhouse had quit after witnessing a particularly brutal fight night. Blood on the walls, broken furniture, the kind of mess that reminded civilians why they stayed away from 1%er clubs. The VP had hired a new company, a professional outfit that specialized in discretion. No questions, no judgments, no scared teenagers who would gossip to police or post photos online. The contract was simple: invisible service, come in early morning hours when the brothers were gone, clean everything, leave no trace of your presence. The new maid had started on a Thursday. Razor hadn't been there. He had been in Savannah negotiating a parts deal with a supplier who owed him money and respect. When he returned Friday afternoon and checked the security footage, something he did obsessively, constantly scanning for threats, for rivals, for any crack in his armor, he saw her for the first time. She was small, maybe 5'4", moving through the clubhouse kitchen with quiet efficiency. Black woman, mid-30s, wearing a plain gray cleaning uniform that made her look like a shadow. She didn't touch anything unnecessary. Didn't open drawers out of curiosity or linger over the photos of brothers and bikes that covered every wall. She wiped down surfaces, organized the chaos left behind from the previous night's party, emptied trash bags filled with beer bottles and cigarette butts. Her face showed nothing. No disgust at the mess, no judgment of the lifestyle, no personality whatsoever. She was exactly what the contract promised, invisible. Except for the ring. Razor had almost missed it. He was fast-forwarding through footage, checking timestamps, making sure the cleaning crew wasn't snooping where they shouldn't. But something made him stop. Rewind. Play at normal speed. The woman was washing dishes in the industrial sink, hands buried in soapy water, and when she reached for a towel to dry them, the light caught something on her left ring finger. Razor leaned closer to the monitor, heart hammering against his ribs. He zoomed in, the image pixelating but still clear enough. A bent chain link. Purple glass with a chip on the corner. 3 specific twists in the metal that he had made himself, copying a pattern he had seen on a custom bike in a magazine, thinking it looked strong, permanent, unbreakable. The coffee cup in his hand slipped, splashing hot liquid across his desk. He didn't notice. He was 15 years old again, standing in the group home basement with stolen pliers and a piece of broken bottle glass, bleeding and determined. He was hearing Camille's voice, quiet and careful, always afraid to take up too much space. "You don't have to give me anything, Razor. Just don't forget me." He was feeling the weight of that promise settling into his bones, believing with the absolute certainty of a child that he would keep it, that he would come back for her, that nothing could stop him. And then he was 16, standing in the driveway of a house he didn't recognize, watching a retired biker named Hendricks load his few possessions into a truck. Hendricks had found him fixing a broken lawnmower at the group home with nothing but intuition and rage, had seen potential in a kid everyone else had written off as another system statistic. Hendricks had offered him an apprenticeship, a real future, a way out of the cycle that destroyed boys like him. But there was a condition, one condition that Hendricks delivered with the finality of a closing cell door. "You cut ties completely. The system will drag you back if you give them threads to pull. No contact with anyone from that place. You walk away clean, or you don't walk at all." Razor had looked back at the group home one time, had seen Camille's face in a second-floor window, watching him leave. He had told himself he would find a way to contact her later, when he was stronger, when he had something to offer besides broken promises and empty hands. But Hendricks's world had swallowed him whole. The garage, the club, the Brotherhood. By the time Razor earned his patch and had the resources to look back, he had convinced himself that Camille had moved on, been adopted, built a life that didn't include a ghost from a group home. He had been lying to himself. And now the lie was standing in his clubhouse kitchen, wearing the proof of his cowardice on her finger. Razor spent the next 3 days watching security footage like a man possessed. He studied her movements, searched for any sign that she recognized where she was, whose territory she was cleaning. But Camille, if it was really her, if he wasn't losing his mind, gave nothing away. She arrived at 6 a.m. every morning, cleaned for exactly 4 hours, and left without speaking to anyone. She never looked at the club photos on the walls, never paused at the pictures of Razor that his brothers had mounted in the main room, never showed any curiosity about the man who owned the place she was making spotless. On the 4th day, Razor decided to test her. He needed to know if she knew. If she remembered. If she was here by accident or by design. He went to his shop late at night, found a broken motorcycle chain in his scrap bin, and selected a single link. The next morning, before the sun rose, he drove to the clubhouse and placed that chain link on the kitchen counter, right where she would find it. Then he went back to his shop, pulled up the security feed, and waited. Camille arrived at 6:03 a.m. She set down her cleaning supplies, tied her hair back, and began her routine. She wiped down the bar, swept the main room, emptied ashtrays. At 6:47 a.m., she entered the kitchen. Razor stopped breathing. She moved toward the sink, reaching for the dish soap, and her hand stopped exactly 3 inches from the chain link. For 5 seconds, she didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just stared at that piece of metal like it was a loaded gun. Then, slowly, carefully, she picked it up. She held it in her palm, thumb tracing the curve of the link, and Razor saw her lips move. She was saying something, words he couldn't hear through the silent security feed. Her hand closed around the chain link, tight enough that her knuckles went pale. Then she opened a drawer, placed the chain link inside carefully, as if it were made of glass, and closed the drawer without a sound. She finished washing the dishes. She dried her hands. She continued her routine exactly as before. But Razor had seen enough. She knew. She remembered. And she wasn't saying a word. That night, Razor pulled up records he had buried years ago, files he had paid a private investigator to compile when his club was established, and he finally had the resources to look back. He found Camille's group home file, scanned the placement history, and stopped cold at an entry dated 3 months after he left. Adoption finalized, Camille Wright placed with Gregory and Patricia Johnson, Atlanta, Georgia. Status: permanent placement. The Johnsons were wealthy. Real estate developers. The kind of people who lived in gated communities and drove cars worth more than most people's houses. Camille had gotten everything Razor had wanted for her: a family, stability, money, a future. So why, 18 years later, was she scrubbing floors in a biker clubhouse, wearing a ring made from trash, and pretending she didn't know him? Razor leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen, and felt the past crack open like a fault line beneath his feet. Something had gone very, very wrong. And the woman who held all the answers was 3 blocks away, silent as a grave, waiting for him to figure out what question he was supposed to ask. Razor didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment above the bike shop, laptop glowing in the darkness, staring at Camille's adoption record until the words blurred into meaningless shapes. The Johnsons had given her everything. A mansion in Buckhead, private schools, a trust fund that matured when she turned 25. On paper, Camille Wright had won the lottery that every group home kid dreamed about. She had escaped the system, landed in a world of country clubs and charity galas, been handed the kind of future that boys like Razor had to build with their own bleeding hands. So why was she here, wearing a maid's uniform and a copper ring, pretending not to recognize the man who had abandoned her? The question ate at him like acid. Razor had spent 18 years becoming someone who didn't ask questions he couldn't handle the answers to. He had learned to bury doubt, to trust his instincts, to act with the kind of certainty that made other men follow him into violence without hesitation. But now, faced with a ghost from his past who refused to speak, he felt like that terrified 16-year-old kid again, paralyzed by fear of what the truth might cost him. He could walk into that clubhouse right now. Corner her in the kitchen. Demand to know why she was here, what she wanted, whether she hated him or had simply forgotten him. But doing that would mean admitting who he used to be. It would mean tearing down the walls he had built around the boy from Jefferson County group home, the walls that protected him from being seen as weak, as broken, as someone who had made promises he couldn't keep. So Razor made a different choice. He would test her. He would leave breadcrumbs only someone from that group home would recognize, and he would watch her reactions like a hunter tracking prey. He would gather evidence, build his case, and only then, when he was certain, would he decide what to do. It wasn't courage. Razor knew that. It was cowardice dressed up as strategy. But it was all he could manage. The second test came 2 days later. Razor remembered a gospel song that the group home chaplain had played every Sunday morning, a slow, mournful hymn about lost children finding their way home. The chaplain had been one of the few adults who treated them like human beings instead of case numbers, and that song had become a kind of anthem for the kids who had nowhere else to belong. Camille used to hum it under her breath when she was scared, a nervous habit that drove the older girls crazy but that Razor had found oddly comforting. He downloaded the song from an obscure gospel archive, loaded it onto the clubhouse sound system, and set it to play at 7 a.m., right in the middle of Camille's cleaning routine. Then he sat in his shop, watching the security feed, heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Camille entered the clubhouse at 6:02 a.m., exactly as always. She moved through her tasks with mechanical precision, wiping down surfaces that were already clean, organizing bottles behind the bar in perfect rows. At 7 a.m., the music started. The opening notes filled the empty clubhouse, a piano melody that sounded like rain on a tin roof, followed by a woman's voice singing about mercy and grace and children who had been forgotten by the world. Camille was dusting the bookshelves in the lounge when the song began. Her hand slowed against the wood, the cloth hanging limp in her fingers. She turned toward the speakers, eyes unfocused, seeing something far beyond the present moment. Her lips moved, forming words that Razor knew by heart because he had memorized them too, sitting in that group home chapel next to her, both of them pretending they believed in a God who cared about thrown-away kids. She stood there for 43 seconds. Razor counted every one. Then she blinked, straightened her shoulders with visible effort, and continued dusting as if nothing had happened. But her hand was shaking. Razor zoomed in on the feed, watching the tremor in her fingers as she worked, and felt something twist in his chest that might have been guilt or hope or some toxic combination of both. She recognized the song. She remembered. And it hurt her to hear it. Razor should have stopped there. He had his answer. But knowing wasn't enough anymore. He needed to understand the shape of her pain, the depth of her silence, the reason she was enduring his presence without ever looking him in the eye. So he planned a third test, the most dangerous one, the one that would either confirm everything or destroy the fragile possibility that had started growing in the space between them. He had kept one photograph from the group home, hidden in a lockbox in his apartment for 18 years. It showed a group of kids sitting on the front steps of Jefferson County, squinting against winter sunlight. Razor was in the back row, 15 years old, skinny and serious, wearing a donated jacket 3 sizes too big. Camille sat 2 rows ahead, her head turned slightly toward the camera, her expression guarded in the way that kids who have been hurt too many times always looked guarded. But if you looked closely, if you knew what to look for, you could see that her shoulder was touching Razor's knee, a connection so small it was almost invisible, but that meant everything to two kids who had no one else. Razor placed the photograph on the bar in the clubhouse lounge, face up, positioned exactly where Camille would see it when she came to wipe down the surface. Then he drove back to his shop, pulled up the security feed, and waited with the kind of dread that felt like falling. Camille entered the lounge at 8:15 a.m. She was carrying a trash bag in one hand and a spray bottle in the other, moving with the efficient grace of someone who had cleaned 1,000 rooms and learned to make herself invisible in all of them. She set the trash bag down, sprayed the bar surface, and reached for her cloth. Then she saw the photograph. Her whole body went still. Not the freeze of someone startled, but the stillness of someone who had just taken a bullet and hadn't yet realized they were bleeding. She set the spray bottle down slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter the moment. Then she picked up the photograph with both hands, holding it the way you would hold something sacred, something fragile, something that could turn to dust if you weren't careful. Razor watched her face on the screen, watched the wall she had built around herself crack and crumble. Her thumb traced across the faces of children who were grown now, scattered across the country or dead or lost to the system that had chewed them up. She stopped at two faces, lingering there, and Razor knew without seeing which ones they were. Him and her. The boy who had promised everything and the girl who had believed him. She stood there for 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Razor timed it, unable to look away, barely breathing. Tears ran down her face, silent and steady, and she didn't wipe them away. She just stood there, holding a photograph of people they used to be, letting herself feel something she had clearly spent years learning not to feel. Then, with a control that Razor recognized as survival instinct, she set the photograph down. She placed it exactly where she had found it, aligned perfectly with the edge of the bar. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, picked up her cleaning supplies, and finished her work as if the last 3 minutes had never happened. But they had happened. Razor had seen her break. And that meant she had been holding herself together this entire time, walking through his world with a discipline that must have cost her everything, maintaining the fiction that she was just a maid and he was just another client and the past was just something that had happened to different people. The restraint, the absolute commitment to remaining invisible, broke something inside Razor. She knew who he was. She had probably known from the moment she took this job. Yet she had said nothing, demanded nothing, expected nothing. She was still protecting him, just like she had done when they were kids, protecting him from the confrontation he was too afraid to initiate, giving him space to pretend he didn't recognize her if that was what he needed. The distance between them became unbearable. Razor started finding reasons to be at the clubhouse during cleaning hours. He would sit in the lounge, pretending to go through paperwork, stealing glances at her as she moved through her tasks. She acknowledged him with polite nods and nothing more, maintaining the wall between employer and employee with perfect precision. He wanted to grab her shoulders and shake the truth out of her. He wanted to fall at her feet and beg forgiveness. Instead, he asked her to refill his coffee cup and watched her walk away, the purple glass ring catching the light. His brothers started noticing. His VP pulled him aside after a church meeting, concern written across his scarred face. "You good, Prez? You've been acting strange. Something wrong with the cleaning crew?" Razor lied smoothly, said everything was fine, said he was just dealing with supplier issues. But the truth was he was losing his mind, trapped between the man he had become and the boy he had been, unable to move forward or back. 3 weeks after Camille had started working at the clubhouse, Razor made a decision that would force everything into the open, whether he was ready or not. The Iron Wolves were hosting their annual charity poker night, an event designed to clean dirty money and maintain good relations with local business owners who donated generously in exchange for the club's protection. Rich civilians would fill the clubhouse, gambling for at-risk youth programs, with the kind of irony that made Razor's stomach turn. His VP had already arranged for extra security and minimal staff visibility. The last thing they needed was wealthy donors getting uncomfortable around 1%er bikers. But Razor overruled him. He ordered all available cleaning staff to work the event, including Camille. His VP protested, said it was bad optics, said the woman was too quiet and submissive and would make the donors nervous. Razor shut him down with a look that ended the conversation. He told himself it was a practical decision, that they needed the extra hands. But the truth was darker and more desperate. He wanted her in his world. He wanted to see her surrounded by the power and respect he had built, wanted her to witness what the scared boy from the group home had become. And somewhere deep in the part of himself he didn't want to examine too closely, he wanted to create a situation that would force her to break her silence, to react, to acknowledge him in a way that couldn't be ignored. Razor was playing with fire. He knew it. But he had spent 18 years running from the past, and now the past was 3 blocks away wearing a maid's uniform, and he couldn't run anymore. The night of the poker event, Razor stood at the head table, watching the door, waiting for Camille to arrive. The clubhouse was filled with men in expensive suits and women dripping with jewelry, all of them pretending they weren't scared of the bikers serving them drinks and dealing their cards. The air smelled like cigar smoke and cologne and money, the scent of people who had never gone hungry, never slept in a group home bed, never made promises with trash because they had nothing else to give. At 7:30 p.m., Camille walked through the door. She was wearing the same black uniform, carrying a tray of champagne glasses, eyes down. She moved through the crowd like smoke, invisible to everyone except Razor, who tracked her across the room like a compass pointing north. That was when Garrett Kinsley decided to destroy everything. And Razor would have to choose between the man he had become and the boy who had made a promise 18 years ago under a broken streetlight to a girl who still wore his ring. Garrett Kinsley was everything Razor had learned to hate in a very specific, surgical way. Old money, inherited wealth, the kind of man who had never built anything with his own hands but spoke with the authority of someone who believed the world owed him deference simply for existing. He owned half the commercial real estate in Atlanta's wealthier suburbs, sat on charity boards to dodge taxes, and treated service workers like furniture that occasionally needed replacing. Razor had done business with him twice, both times walking away feeling like he needed a shower. Tonight, Garrett was drunk on expensive scotch and the kind of arrogance that came from never being told no. He was losing at poker, badly, and looking for someone to blame or humiliate to salvage his ego. When Camille passed his table carrying a tray of champagne glasses, Garrett's eyes locked onto her with the predatory focus of a man who had found an acceptable target. Razor saw it happen from across the room. He was standing at the head table with his VP and road captain, pretending to listen to a donor's rambling story about vintage motorcycles, but his attention had never left Camille. He had been watching her move through the crowd for the past hour, tracking her like a hunter, noting the way she kept her head down, the way she navigated around groups of men without ever making eye contact, the way the purple glass ring caught the light every time she set down a glass or picked up an empty plate. She was 10 feet from Garrett's table when he called out to her, his voice cutting through the ambient noise with the sharp edge of entitlement. "You there. Black girl with the tray. Come here." Camille stopped. Her shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly, a micro-reaction that Razor recognized because he had spent weeks studying her every movement. She turned toward Garrett's table, her face carefully neutral, and walked over with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to make herself small in the presence of dangerous men. Garrett didn't stand. Didn't acknowledge her as a person. He just reached out and grabbed her wrist, yanking her hand toward him with enough force that the champagne glasses on her tray rattled dangerously. "Let me see that," he said, his words slurring slightly. He was staring at the ring on her finger, squinting at it like it was something offensive, something that didn't belong on the hand of someone serving him drinks. Razor's VP noticed his sudden stillness. "Prez. You good?" But Razor didn't answer. He was already moving, his body acting before his mind could catch up, pushing through the crowd toward Garrett's table. "Well, well, well," Garrett was saying, loud enough that nearby tables turned to look. "Isn't this interesting? Ladies and gentlemen, look at this." He held Camille's hand up like he was displaying evidence in a trial, and Razor saw her face go pale, saw her try to pull away, saw Garrett's grip tighten. "The help is wearing jewelry. And what jewelry it is! Is this copper? Is that glass from a broken bottle?" Laughter rippled through Garrett's table, the kind of cruel, thoughtless laughter that rich people used as a weapon when they wanted to remind someone of their place. One of the women sitting next to Garrett, a blonde in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, leaned in to get a better look. "Oh my God, it is. It's literally trash. Who wears garbage?" Garrett's smile was vicious. "I know who. Camille Wright, or should I say, Camille Johnson's little charity project." He looked up at Camille, his eyes glittering with malicious recognition. "That's right, I remember you now. The Johnsons paraded you around at fundraisers for years, their token success story. The poor little orphan they saved. Except you weren't so grateful, were you? Ran away like an ungrateful. Let go of her hand." Razor's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The entire room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people pausing their conversations, but the dangerous quiet of people recognizing that violence was about to happen and they needed to decide whether to run or watch. Garrett looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Excuse me. I'm having a conversation with. Let go of her hand." Razor was standing 5 feet away now, close enough that Garrett would have to be an idiot not to recognize the threat in his posture, in his tone, in the absolute certainty radiating from him that this was not a negotiation. Garrett's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. He wasn't used to being interrupted, especially not by someone he viewed as hired help, even if that help wore a president's patch and owned the building they were standing in. "This is ridiculous. I was just pointing out that." He didn't finish the sentence. Because in one swift, brutal motion, Garrett twisted the ring off Camille's finger. She made a sound, small and broken, a sound that Razor felt like a physical blow to his chest. Garrett held the copper ring up for everyone to see, dangling it between his thumb and forefinger like it was contaminated. "Let me do you a favor, sweetheart. This trash is why you'll never find a real husband. Let me throw it away for you." He tossed the ring carelessly over his shoulder. It hit the hardwood floor with a small, metallic sound that somehow cut through all the noise and chaos and murmured conversations. It bounced twice, the purple glass catching the overhead lights, and rolled toward the far wall, disappearing under a bar stool. Camille dropped to her knees instantly. The tray clattered from her hands, champagne glasses shattering around her in an explosion of crystal and golden liquid. She didn't seem to notice. She was already crawling toward the bar stool, searching desperately, her hands shaking, her carefully maintained composure finally, completely shattered. Look at her, Garrett laughed, turning to his table like he was hosting a show. Scrambling on the floor like an animal for a piece of garbage. This is what the Johnsons wasted $200,000 trying to civilize. Pathetic. Razor moved. The crowd parted for him instinctively, sensing the shift in the air, the way predators sense when a bigger predator enters the territory. He walked past Garrett without looking at him, past the staring donors and his own brothers who had started moving toward the table, past everything except the woman on her hands and knees searching for something that meant more to her than every diamond in the room combined. He dropped to one knee beside her on the cold hardwood floor. The entire clubhouse held its breath. Razor, president of the Iron Wolves MC, a man who commanded absolute respect and fear, was kneeling on the ground next to his maid. The optics were devastating. His VP was making frantic hand gestures from across the room, trying to signal him to get up, to handle this differently, to maintain the power dynamic that kept their world functioning. Razor ignored him. He could see the ring now, lodged against the far table leg under the barstool. He reached for it, his fingers closing around the familiar weight of copper and glass, and felt 18 years of buried guilt crash over him like a wave. The metal was still warm from her skin. The purple glass still had the same chip on the corner that he had made when he was 15 years old, cutting it with stolen tools in a group home basement, believing with desperate certainty that this ring meant something, that promises mattered, that love was stronger than fear. He had been wrong about so many things. But not about this. Never about this. Razor turned to Camille. She was staring at him, tears streaming down her face, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. This close, he could see everything she had been hiding, the pain, the anger, the hope she had tried so hard to kill but couldn't quite bury. He could see the girl she had been and the woman she had become and all the years between them that he had stolen with his cowardice. He took her left hand gently. Her fingers were trembling. So were his. He slid the ring back onto her finger, the same finger where he had placed it 18 years ago under a broken streetlight, and felt something break open inside his chest that he had been holding closed for so long he had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without the weight. Then Razor stood. He turned to face Garrett Kinsley, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. 300 of Atlanta's wealthiest citizens stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, watching the most powerful man in the room defend his maid in front of everyone. "This ring," Razor said, his voice carrying across the absolute silence, "is worth more than every dollar in this room combined. And you just insulted the woman wearing it. In my house. In front of me." Garrett's face had gone from flushed to pale. He was starting to realize he had miscalculated badly, that the power dynamics he understood in boardrooms and country clubs didn't apply here, that he had just made an enemy of someone who operated by different rules. "Now wait just a minute, I didn't mean. Get out." Razor's voice was flat, final, the tone he used when he was giving someone one chance to walk away before his brothers made sure they couldn't walk at all. "Get out of my clubhouse. Don't ever come back. And if I hear you've contacted her, spoken about her, or even thought about her too hard, I will personally make sure you regret it for the rest of your considerably shortened life." Garrett stood, his chair scraping against the floor. He gathered his jacket with shaking hands, looking around desperately for support from the other donors, from someone, from anyone. But no one moved. No one spoke. They all understood what Razor had just done, the statement he had just made, the line he had just drawn. Garrett walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silence. But at the door, he stopped. Turned back. And with the kind of spite that came from a wounded ego and too much alcohol, he decided to take one last shot. You. He laughed, bitter and vicious. You want to marry her? That's what this is about. Razor, everyone in Atlanta knows her story. She ran from a mansion to scrub toilets for bikers. The Johnsons gave her everything, education, money, a future, and she threw it away because she's too broken to accept love from anyone. She doesn't want you. She doesn't want anyone. She's just a damaged little girl playing dress-up in a maid's uniform because it's the only place she feels safe. You're not rescuing her. You're just another man she'll run from when you get too close. The words hung in the air like poison. Razor saw Camille's face go white. Saw her whole body tense like she had been struck. Saw something in her eyes that looked like confirmation, like Garrett had just spoken a truth she had been hiding from herself. And then she ran. Turned and ran toward the back exit, her footsteps quick and desperate, leaving her cleaning supplies scattered across the floor, leaving the shattered champagne glasses and the staring crowd and Razor standing alone in the middle of his clubhouse with a choice that would define everything that came next. Chase her. Finish Garrett. The two options warred in his mind for exactly 1 second. Then Razor looked at his VP, jerked his head toward Garrett, and ran after Camille without another word. Behind him, he heard his VP's voice, cold and professional. Mr. Kinsley, my brothers would like to have a conversation with you outside about club etiquette. But Razor was already gone, pushing through the back exit into the parking lot, searching the darkness for the woman who had been running from her past for 18 years and had just been given one more reason to keep running. Razor found her in the parking lot, sitting on the curb behind a row of motorcycles, her face buried in her hands. The security lights cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the muffled sounds of the party inside felt like they were coming from a different world entirely. She was crying, not the silent tears he had seen on the security footage, but deep, shaking sobs that made her whole body tremble. It was the sound of someone who had been holding themselves together for so long that the breaking felt like relief and devastation all at once. He didn't know what to say. For 18 years, Razor had imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways. Sometimes he was eloquent, finding perfect words that explained everything and made her understand. Sometimes she forgave him instantly, fell into his arms, and they rebuilt what had been broken. Sometimes she screamed at him, hit him, told him exactly what his abandonment had cost her, and he took every blow because he deserved it. But in all those imagined scenarios, he had never pictured this. Both of them broken, both of them scared, both of them too damaged to know how to reach across the space between them. Razor sat down on the curb beside her, leaving a careful foot of distance between them. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate for the weight they were supposed to carry. "For all of it. For leaving. For not coming back. For being too afraid to face you when you showed up here. For tonight. If this story is hitting you hard, if you've ever had to face someone you hurt or someone who hurt you, hit that like button and subscribe. These next few minutes matter more than anything that came before, and I need you here for it." Camille lifted her head, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Up close, without the barrier of security cameras and carefully maintained distance, Razor could see the ways time had changed her. The softness of childhood was gone, replaced by the sharp angles of someone who had learned to survive in worlds that didn't want her. But her eyes were the same, still too old, still carrying weight that no one should have to carry alone. "You want to know why I'm here?" Her voice was raw, scraped clean by tears and years of silence. "You want to know why I left a mansion to scrub floors in a biker clubhouse?" She laughed, bitter and broken. "Because the Johnsons didn't save me," Razor. They bought me. Like a show dog. Like a trophy. Something they could parade around at fundraisers to prove how charitable and progressive they were. Look at us, adopting a black girl from the system. Aren't we wonderful? Razor felt his hands curl into fists, but he forced himself to stay still, to listen, to let her speak the truth she had been carrying alone. They gave me everything except freedom, Camille continued, her words spilling out now like a dam had broken. Private school, yes. But only the one they chose, where I could be seen with their daughter, where I made them look good. Nice clothes, yes. But nothing I picked myself, nothing that reflected who I actually was. They had rules for everything. How I spoke. How I sat. What I said when people asked about my background. I was supposed to be grateful, endlessly grateful, for being rescued from poverty. And I was, at first. Because compared to the group home, it felt like winning the lottery. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them like she was trying to hold herself together. But then I started realizing that love isn't supposed to come with conditions. That family isn't supposed to feel like a performance you have to nail every single day or risk losing everything. When I was 16, I asked if I could visit the group home, see some of the kids I grew up with. Mrs. Johnson told me I needed to stop living in the past, that those people would only drag me down. When I was 17, I got accepted to a state university on a scholarship. Mr. Johnson made me decline it because it wasn't prestigious enough, didn't fit their image. They wanted me at an Ivy League school, somewhere they could drop in conversations with their friends. Razor watched her face as she spoke, seeing the weight of years of controlled suffocation, of being grateful for a cage just because it was prettier than the last one. When I was 19, I told them I wanted to study social work, maybe help other kids like me. They said absolutely not. Business degree or law degree, something respectable. Something they could be proud of. And that was when I realized I was never going to be their daughter. I was always going to be their project, their proof of concept, their before and after photo. She met his eyes, and Razor saw something in them he recognized because he had felt it himself. The desperate need to be seen as a person, not a symbol or a story or a lesson. So I ran. Took nothing but the clothes I was wearing in this ring. Worked under the table jobs for years. Lived in places that made the group home look comfortable. Learned to disappear, to be invisible, because being noticed had only ever gotten me hurt or controlled or turned into someone's redemption narrative. Her fingers touched the copper ring, the gesture so automatic it was clearly habit. 2 years ago, I saw your name in a motorcycle magazine. Article about custom bike builders in Georgia. There was a photo of you standing in your shop, and I recognized you immediately. Same eyes. Same way of standing like you were ready to fight the world. Razor's throat tightened. She had been looking for him. All this time, he had convinced himself she had moved on, forgotten, built a life that didn't include the ghost of a boy who had broken his promise. But she had been searching too, carrying his ring like a compass pointing towards something she needed to understand. I didn't come here for money, Camille said softly. I didn't come to make you keep a promise we made as kids. I came because I needed to know something. She turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. I needed to know if the boy who protected me, who gave me the only thing he had, who made me feel like I mattered even when the world said I didn't, I needed to know if that boy still existed. Or if the world had beaten him out of you too. Razor felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling. I knew you were here from day one, he confessed, his voice rough. I recognized the ring the first time I saw it on camera. And I did nothing. I watched you clean my clubhouse for weeks, tested you with chain links and songs and photographs, and I couldn't bring myself to just walk up to you and say your name because I was terrified. He forced himself to hold her gaze, to let her see the truth of him. Terrified you would hate me. Terrified you would forgive me. Terrified that either way, I would have to face what I did, who I abandoned, the promise I broke because I was too weak and selfish to keep it. You were 16, Camille said quietly. You were a kid who got offered a way out of hell. I never blamed you for taking it. You should have. Razor's hands were shaking. I should have found a way. Should have contacted you. Should have done something other than convince myself you were better off without me. Maybe I was. Camille's smile was sad. Maybe we both needed to become different people before we could face each other. The girl I was then, she would have waited forever. She would have built her whole life around that promise, made you into something you could never live up to. And you needed to become someone strong enough to admit you were wrong. She stood up, brushing dust from her uniform, and Razor felt panic spike through him. She was leaving. This was goodbye. He had waited too long, been too afraid, and now she was going to walk away and he would lose her again, this time forever. But Camille extended her hand to him. Get up. I need to show you something. Razor took her hand, letting her pull him to his feet. She led him across the parking lot to an older Honda Civic, unlocked the trunk, and pulled out a small duffel bag. From inside, she retrieved a worn notebook. She opened it to the first page and handed it to him. The page was covered in careful handwriting. Names. Dozens of them. Razor recognized them immediately, kids from Jefferson County Group Home. Next to each name was a status update. Marcus. Living in Chicago, mechanic. Lisa, married, 2 kids, Ohio. Devin, died 2019, overdose. Tommy, military, stationed in Germany. I've been tracking them for years, Camille explained. Every kid we grew up with. Finding out where they ended up, if they're okay, if they need help. Some of them I've been able to reach, help in small ways. Most of them don't know it's me. I couldn't let them disappear. Couldn't let the system erase them like they never mattered. Razor stared at the notebook, feeling something shift in his chest. She hadn't just survived. She had turned her pain into purpose, her isolation into mission. She had become exactly what the Johnsons had tried to prevent, someone who remembered where she came from and refused to pretend it didn't matter. I'm leaving Georgia tomorrow, Camille said, and Razor's heart stopped. But not because of you. Not because of tonight. I've been planning it for months. There's a group home in Tennessee that needs volunteer coordinators. Former system kids helping current system kids. It doesn't pay much, but it's real work. Work that matters. Don't go. The words escaped before Razor could stop them. Or let me come with you. Let me help. Let me do something other than stand here wishing I could go back 18 years and make different choices. Camille studied his face for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a second copper ring. This one was newer, the metal cleaner, the twist pattern slightly different but clearly made by the same hands. I made this 3 weeks ago, she said quietly. After I recognized you on that first day. I made it because I wanted to believe that maybe we could both wear matching rings this time. Partners instead of promises. She held the ring out to him. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking you to fix the past or make grand gestures. I'm asking if you want to build something new. Not as the scared kids we were, but as the people we've become. Because here's what I learned, Razor, you can't go back. You can only go forward. And going forward alone has been keeping me alive, but it hasn't been making me whole. Razor took the ring with shaking hands. It was rough, imperfect, made with the same desperate hope that had created the first one. He slid it onto his finger, feeling the weight settle like an anchor, like a promise he might actually be strong enough to keep this time. I'll sell the shop, he said. Hand over the president patch to my VP. Tennessee needs custom bike builders too. And if they don't, I'll learn to do something else. Something that matters. Camille smiled, really smiled, for the first time since he had found her. You don't have to burn your whole life down for me. I'm not burning it down. Razor took her hand, the one wearing the original copper ring, and held it gently. I'm finally building the right one. 18 years late, but better late than never, right? She leaned her head against his shoulder, the same gesture she had made 1,000 times when they were kids sitting on the group home fire escape, dreaming of futures that seemed impossible. Better late than never, she agreed. 6 months later, Razor stood in the parking lot of Liberty House Group Home in Memphis, watching Camille teach a 14-year-old girl how to change a motorcycle tire. The girl was defensive, angry, wearing hurt-like armor in the way that system kids always did. But Camille was patient, showing her where to place the wrench, how to feel for the moment when resistance gave way. Razor had watched her do this with 12 kids now, teaching them small skills that made them feel capable, competent, like they could fix things instead of just being broken things themselves. He wore both rings now, Camille's original copper band and the new one she had made. They caught the afternoon sun, turning the cheap metal into something that looked almost precious. His brothers back in Georgia had been shocked when he stepped down, handed over his cut, walked away from everything he had built. But they had thrown him a goodbye party that lasted 3 days, made him promise to visit, reminded him that Brotherhood didn't end just because geography changed. Camille finished the lesson and walked over to where Razor was leaning against his truck. Ready to head home? She asked. Home. They shared a small apartment near the group home, nothing fancy, nothing that looked like success by conventional measures. But the plants from her old apartment filled the windows. Their matching rings sat in a dish by the door. And every night they sat on the balcony, drinking cheap coffee and talking about their day, about the kids they were trying to help, about the futures they were building one small choice at a time. Ready, Razor said. Some promises take 18 years to keep. Some promises get broken and remade into something better. And some promises were never really about marriage or grand romantic gestures. They were about seeing someone, protecting them, making them feel like they mattered when the whole world said they didn't. Razor and Camille had found each other twice now, once as kids who had nothing, and again as adults who had learned that nothing was sometimes enough if you were brave enough to start building from there. The copper rings weren't diamonds. They never would be. But they were real, made with bleeding hands and desperate hope, and they had survived everything the world had thrown at them. Just like the two people wearing them.